Okay, so basically, when talking about, when we were planning this, one of the aspects that, in my view, is more important when it comes to Sonata is that precisely we have addressed the three dimensions for recursion. And this is something that when talking about recursion, very often people tend to think just in stacking one thing on top of the other, and this is a typical, I'm using the functions or the services below as a kind of resources as well, so you can stack services, other services that use those other services as resources indefinitely or to two or three layers. But if you think about it, recursion, when it comes to repeating the same structure, when it comes to NFV and in general to software networks, can come in three different dimensions. One is the obvious, or the first one, which is, I have put them in a certain relationship. The two first, because they are somehow connected on how you structure it in a diagram when you're connecting things. The horizontal is when you have several domains, you have something that are in a hierarchy are somehow equivalent. You have two operators, two service providers, two network providers that are co-located, independent, and what you have is that you make them integrate and you make them communicate to satisfy a request in one side by forwarding or passing through the request to the other side. That implies precisely this, that there is no central authority. If we are providing a joint service with let's say BT, there is no reason why there is one that is overarching or controlling everything. So, and that's what you need is essentially trust links, and the model is about federation. Is that you federate both resources. There is the only common authority is the one bringing precisely that trust. Then we say what you have the vertical, in which there is an implicit some kind of hierarchy in the sense that, as I said before, services at one layer become infrastructure at the upper layer. So you can see there is you can go down from the service graph down to the resource graph, and then again to a more detailed service graph. Normally, we're talking about operators that are providing different layers in which you are the operators in the upper layers are using or are users of the operators in the lower layers. Typical example is a cloud provider and a tenant that has on the other case users. And this is something that we are considering in NFV as the case of an infrastructure provider and the network service providers that would be running their VNFs on top of the infrastructure. In here, what is key is abstraction, and something that is very important is information hiding. You hide the complexities, you hide the details about how you have providing something from the APIs or the interfaces that are used upwards. And here we can call about composition. You compose different resources, you build your service by composing elements that are in the layer below. And finally, there is one that is very important that normally is not referred to because it's somehow new or has appeared later on. But if you think about this, it's operational recursion. You have the possibility of different roles that are affecting the operation of a certain set of services. That means that you have in the first case, you have interdomain. In the second case, you have interprovider. In the third case, you have interconcerns. There are developers that are concerned about developing and validating the services or the functions, and the people running the infrastructure that are concerned about how the operation is performed. You need, in this case, a very, very strict authentication and authorization because it's someone that can affect directly not only the infrastructure, not only a particular function, but the whole core of what you're providing. And then this is what you have DevOps, which is another, if you think about this, is another dimension for recursion, no more, no less. So what is important is when you think in terms of 5G, and this is a diagram that probably you have seen before, is a diagram that was produced by the 5G architecture working group, the 5G PPP architecture working group, in which precisely what is intended to show is that there is in there, when you move from a plane in which you're talking about infrastructure resources or pure network functions provided by the operators, then and if you move forward, you move upwards, and you're thinking in what is one of the key aspects of 5G, that is network slicing, providing users of the network of consistent virtual networks that have independent operation. What you need is you are repeating again, the functional layers that you have to provide the network services up in the slice hierarchy. So the operator of a slice, the organization that is providing, for example, in the case of, I don't know, the robots, the organization that is providing access to the industrial internet will see and will manage functional units the same way that the network operator is managing functional units providing network, virtual network functions. So the idea is that since you are repeating this, there is a point in which things are crucial. There is this multi-service control layer when you adapt from the slice view, so to say, down to what would be the network view. In that respect, and as Michel was saying before, we have we are considering, or we were considering from the very beginning, that recursion was an essential aspect of the SONATA architecture. First of all, and let me recall a little bit what he was saying before, we're talking about something that is agnostic, which is multi-film, pluggable. As a note, Jun Chao was asking what has left. Jun Chao was asking before precisely about what is the separation between resource orchestration and service orchestration. To some extent, what we call in SONATA the infrastructure adapter is sort of a resource orchestrator in that respect. We don't call it a resource orchestrator, but it's making that role. It's taking the role of precisely taking care of what you do with the resources and adapting among different BIMs and implementation. Is able to work with multi-vendor and multi-site for sure, which is important as well. It's based on the ETSI architecture, and this, let me remark this because it connects very much with what I was saying yesterday when analyzing the future of the ETSI endeavor, is based on the ETSI architecture because the ETSI architecture is not a rigid architecture, it's a framework. It's a framework when you can adapt different architectural options, not only different implementation options, different architectural options that satisfy the functionality that is required. The ETSI architecture requires a functionality for dealing with the service orchestration, a functionality dealing with the lifetime of the virtual functions that are composing a certain service, and dealing with the infrastructure. And this is SONATA fulfills everything, and what is important is that it's following the information models that ETSI is defining. And this is why it's, I would say, 100% compliant with the ETSI architecture. It pursues SDN and NFV integration, and this is something that I would say we are working on, not directly, not solved yet, I would say. And is considering this continuum that is important, that is talking about afterwards, there is a compositional continuum between service and function. There is a service can become a function, and a function can be considered as a service in the continuum. There is no distinction. I mean, there is distinction in the descriptors, but there is this recursion when you build the descriptors, so there is no, say, no, this belongs to this is a service and cannot be anything else. Can be a function in the level below. So at the end, taking into account these three dimensions, for sure, you have two of them that are very well defined, that is these ones with, I have called here the slice support plane. Don't think in terms of a plane, of the control plane or the data plane. That's a real plane. This is a geometrical plane in the sense that you have two dimensions that define a plane. Both of them are the vertical, the horizontal recursion, how you compose things from a provider to a consumer, and in the other direction, how you compose things from among different domains. And you can be at any point in this plane using the SONATA architecture. You can, well, there is a list of that, and which is something more important that we will talk about is how this is enabled by the modular mono-plugin architecture. Finally, you have the third dimension, the DevOps dimension, in which what you're talking is precisely about this collaboration between operators and service developers. That, what is important, is that in all cases, you need to have it mediated. Originally, and I remember when we started discussing about that, this mediation was only associated with DevOps, but then we realized that the mediation could be applied in all cases, and mediation is essential to guarantee principles that are essential for this to work in the real life regarding security and regarding accountability. That these are the two aspects that right now, Michel was saying before that it was important to make it happen, but it's not only that you have to make it happen, you have to make it happen in the right way, because otherwise this should not be operational at all. And having a mediation element that takes care of making all the needed validations, so you are able to validate what comes from the dev side of the DevOps, or what comes from third parties, or the request that comes from your users in the vertical recursion, are essential not only to ensure that nobody is going through it via the usual identification, and that you can't guarantee that confidentiality and integrity happens. It's as well very important in terms of accountability, that you can trace back what's happening in something that will be running very likely on critical infrastructures very soon, or even it is running already. So the role of the gatekeeper, what the gatekeeper does actually, basically it's is in charge of validating any services submitted, or I forgot to put it, requested to the service platform. So whatever you want to put inside the service platform to, basically probably using the word that is so common is onboarding, making it part of the service platform has to go through the gatekeeper. But as well, any additional service request that is made to the service platform and that comes from outside the service platform itself. So what it does is that it mediates for inter-domain, inter-provider requests, and for sure, it mediates in the DevOps as it was originally conceived. Functions related, basically what has to do with user management, whoever and whatever is related to the user management. We're not talking only about people, but we're talking about other modules, other software elements. And that includes all type of recursions, and basically has to do with the AAA. And when thinking about AAA, please don't think about radius. This is not radius. This is not diameter. This is a little bit more. It's about authentication and accounting of anything. People, processes, things going on the containers, whatever. And, well, supporting precisely all the three dimensions, as I said before. Apart from that, when it goes to the particular aspects related to mostly DevOps, it has to do precisely with package management, so it has to be sure that the package can become part of the service environment, doing all the proper authentication and authorization, and doing something that is very important, which is about attestation, ensuring that the package is what is intended to, it was intended to be, and package validation connecting with what Manuel will be talking afterwards precisely on how you emulate the packet and how you can be sure that this would work. It's not only that you can trust it because of the source or because it has not been altered, but it's about that you can be reasonably sure that it's not going to disrupt the environment. And well, and taking care of the whole package lifecycle that has to do with, as you can think about the lifecycle, not of the functions, but of the package as a whole, and how you manage the deployment, dependencies, licensing, etc. which is important is that you need to have it very secure, and this is something that becomes a critical infrastructure. This morning we were talking in another context, talking with people from the NFV security group, that with NFV, in some cases, we are exposing resources that are extremely appealing to attack, and the gatekeeper is one of them. I mean, it's essential because it's the security enforcement point for whatever you do. And this is a critical part in which attack has to, attacks will focus if you want to alter somehow the behavior. And for sure, they have to be secured. And if they have to be secured much more, and with, let's say, with more stringent trust requirements than any other interface that can be outside, because they are the focal point for any security analysis. And something that is important as well is that there are threats, relevant threats that could be related to denial service. Attacking the gatekeeper would transform the whole service platform in unusable, or at least not suitable for updating or managing the packages. And it's necessary, and this is something that I don't think we have yet at all, to implement precisely all these security considerations Michel was mentioning before, to, well, not only to implement the full security requirements, but to detect, overload, and try to mitigate them. So somebody was asking what means could have this to stacking Sonata on Sonata. Is precisely that you have the orchestration at several layers. You have the same kind of orchestrators operating at different layers. Think about the slice orchestrator for the robotics running Sonata and talking precisely as a resource down to the gatekeeper of the network operator that would be running Sonata as well. And they would collaborate through the gatekeeper that would expose the resources provided by the network operator as, the services provided by the network operator would be exposed as resources through a particular adapter. And that adapter, that would be an additional adapter like the one that was mentioned for OpenStack, would be a Sonata adapter for orchestrating. We're talking about orchestrating. We're not talking about the resources themselves. When the resources are deployed and are operating, they will connect in whatever the way that has been orchestrated precisely by the orchestrator. But it's from the point of view of the orchestrator the same way that Sonata would be, for example, using, I don't know, OpenStack or OpenVim or whatever. And that would allow for recursive Sonata hierarchies. For sure, theoretically, this has no limits. Practically, probably a couple of Sonata orchestrators would be much more than enough, exactly. But who knows? You never know when you start, you open the door for this. And this is something that if you think, so far so good, but the important thing is that the pluggable Mano, I mean, the idea that you can extend the Mano framework in Sonata with additional modules is extremely important for this and for potential collaboration with other multi-domain environments, etc. The idea is that in a certain moment, the only interactions that will happen inside the, let's say, the Mano domain using the same message broker, and you will be transparently requesting orchestration operations to your Mano domain without noticing that you are connecting to through a mediation interface to another one, because you will be able to rely on these plugins that will allow, for example, this inter-domain communication, or would allow this inter-provider communication. What means, apart from that, means that since you have this is pluggable, one of the things that the gatekeeper has to be more careful when validating a package would be precisely about these extensions that you can provide by specific modules for functions and services. Well, just to finish, by the way, I saw the drawing that Michel has used for the gatekeeper. This guy of the bouncer is something that we have used in another project. We have a problem with that. And so I decided not to use it, and it was this gatekeepers that looks a little bit more Gothic. That's so is essentially that we have, if we have DevOps, we need to have an approach that needs a trustworthy life cycle, and something that is very important here, let me insist, it's not only about it's not only about authorization and authentication, that are very important. What is key here is accountability. People have to know that everything that they do is being watched and will be asked. The other day, during the NGP meeting, I was asking precisely that probably we should have to start thinking on two-sided SLAs, because we should be aware that in the future, infrastructure will be running third-party functions, third-party services, one way or another. It's not only what the infrastructure will be providing to the user, but would be about what the user will be asking the infrastructure and how. And if there is serious disruption in the infrastructure, it's important to have this clear. And if you have an open relationship with your developers, for sure. The if you ask me, the most reasonable way to do so is precisely with a mediation interfaces, a focal point for this, because these interactions are extremely delicate, and having them in a fully distributed manner would be, to be optimistic, would be a little bit dangerous. And the important thing is that when we started working on the Gatekeeper with these concepts, we realized that you could apply these mediation functions not only to the DevOps, but you could apply them precisely to support the other kind of recursions. And finally, we are taking seriously, standardizing this, or standardizing at least the concept of mediation and how this mediation can be implemented, which are the framework that is required to support mediation is something that is important. And we have starting to look at in the ETSI NFV how to support network slicing is starting to be considered. There are some strong discussions about what network slicing means to start with, but anyway. And the idea is precisely to bring this to the discussion, to say that one of the essential constructs for slicing would be this mediation mechanism. And on the other hand, well, the NFV inside the RTF is much more open. You can drop it there, whatever. So we have started to promote there the Gatekeeper concepts and explore, is a research group, explore how this could be integrated with some kind of there's so much in fashion intent-based approaches. That's all. Again, as Giuseppe was saying, this is what we have there. Thank you.
Any concrete questions for Diego? One question. You mentioned that at the ISG NFV should start working with slices. There is also a use case about this 5G slices, but I assume these are different topics.
Yeah, the idea is not limited to the use case, but precisely to the constructs that would be required and how to stand the management, the MANO framework in order to support slicing. There was in the last meeting we had a discussion on whether slice can be considered exactly a network service or is more than that. And this is precisely where the critical part is. My belief is that things like this mediation framework is necessary to consider that you have you can consider you have a slice and not simply a service.